For the sake of the sect, I confined myself for 500 years. But now, upon my return, everything has changed. My master despises me. The senior sisters loathe me. The new junior brother has replaced everything I once had. However, through an illusion, I saw what happened 10,000 years later. From then on, I tore up the sect contract and defected. I transformed into a rogue cultivator, seeking my own path. But just as I was triumphantly fighting my way to the heavenly path, my former master and senior sisters were crying, begging me to return to the sect. To this, my only response was, "Your beloved junior brother died 500 years ago. That was your choice. The world is heartless. Human relations are evil. The rain sends off the dusk and flowers fall easily." Upon hearing this, Nian Chao's already pained heart suddenly hurt even more, as if 1,000 needles and thorns were gradually tearing her heart apart completely. Gu Xiu, how could he say such things? One must know, the former Gu Xiu was high-spirited. Despite having countless strong enemies, he still made friends all over the world. And when he made friends, he never considered their cultivation level. He only cared if they were agreeable, if they could talk, and if they were worth befriending. Whether you were a commoner or a noble, as long as Gu Xiu recognized you, he would treat you sincerely. Nian Chao had once asked Gu Xiu why he liked making friends so much, and why his friends came from all walks of life. At that time, Gu Xiu's response was also a line of poetry. "A bosom friend afar brings distant lands near." This line had once deeply moved Nian Chao with its boldness. At the same time, it made her envious, thinking that her junior brother truly deserved the title of a celestial being. But how could such a person who cherished friends worldwide and loved making friends from all over, one day say, "The world is heartless, human relations are evil, the rain sends off the dusk, and flowers fall easily"? What did this mean? Or rather, what had made him think and become like this? In fact, Nian Chao knew why, so her heart felt even more pained, as if even breathing had become extremely difficult. Her eyes were full of sorrow and heartache. Junior brother, senior sister, is sorry. Senior sister is truly sorry. At this moment, Nian Chao's heart was filled with infinite guilt. Tears uncontrollably fell to the ground. Yi Hongling, seeing her like this, couldn't help but be a little surprised. Although she didn't know why this powerful and terrifying senior was like this, she guessed in her heart that there might be a connection between them. "Senior, the Taoist friend I met, is he your friend?" Yi Hongling asked. "Not a friend." Nian Chao shook her head, firmly answered, "He is my brother. A brother closer than my own blood brother." What? Yi Hongling was stunned, then said incredulously, "Senior, you must be joking. That Taoist friend, although impressive, couldn't possibly be your brother. Could you have mistaken him and misunderstood?" Nian Chao looked puzzled, not understanding why Yi Hongling would say such a thing. Yi Hongling explained that Taoist friend indeed had extraordinary qualities, but he didn't seem to come from any major sect or have a prominent background. "What do you mean by that?" Nian Chao asked, puzzled. Yi Hongling replied without hesitation, "It's simple. That Taoist friend didn't even have a decent weapon." These words struck Nian Chao like a thunderbolt, leaving her frozen in place. "From the moment I first saw that Taoist friend, his weapon was just a broken wooden stick he picked up by the roadside. If he had a sect background, even a third-rate sect. They would provide at least a mundane weapon, if not a magical or spiritual one, with the many treasures you have, senior. If that Taoist friend were really your brother, his weapon wouldn't be so poor. He wouldn't be using a broken wooden stick. Therefore, I think the person you have in mind is not the same person I'm talking about, Yi Hongling said, confidently. She believed it must have been a misunderstanding. The Guzu who saved her that day, although indeed astonishing and impressive, couldn't possibly be the brother of such a powerful person. How could the sister have so many treasures? Well, the brother was so poor that he didn't even have a proper weapon. This certainty made Nian Chao's face a bit unnatural. She stammered an explanation. His weapon was damaged in an accident. He didn't have time to repair or replace it. Weapon damaged? Yi Hongling shook her head with a smile. That could only be a coincidence. It couldn't possibly be the person you described, senior. Why is that? Look at the spirit stones, Yi Hongling explained. That Taoist friend, although only at the 3rd level of refining, had a stable and refined aura. Clearly a person of exceptional talent. Such a person, in any sect, would surely be given ample resources for cultivation. That Taoist friend had nothing. No storage treasures, not even many spirit stones. Saying not many is putting it kindly. Yi Hongling recalled how Guzu had extorted spirit stones from her, immediately using them for cultivation. Clearly, he was penniless. If he were truly a sect prodigy, how could he need to extort spirit stones from me? He wouldn't even care about them. But her words made things worse. As she continued 170, Nian Chao's face became increasingly awkward. What could she say? Say that Gushu's monthly stipend in the sect was even less than that of a servant disciple? Say that as her brother. He didn't even have a single spirit stone or a single magical treasure, not even a storage treasure. He had some conflicts with the family and didn't have time to take anything with him when he left. Nian Chao could only stammer this response. She was already too ashamed to talk about this with outsiders, let alone admit that she came from Qingshuan Holy Land. Such things were not meant to be spread outside. But Yi Hongling shook her head again. It can't be. Senior, you must have mistaken someone else. Why is that? Nian Chao was a bit afraid. She had been to that cave. What Yi Hongling described matched exactly with what she had found. Not to mention, Yi Hongling had traces of Gushu's aura on her. It was clearly not a mistake. But still, if the weapons and treasures were gone because they were damaged, and the spirit stones and storage treasures were left behind because he didn't take them, there was one absolutely impossible thing. Yi Hongling stated firmly at this moment. Nian Chao was a bit helpless, but also curious. What is it? It's simple. The cultivation technique. Yi Hongling said when that Taoist friend cultivated the spiritual energy of the surrounding area gathered around him like worshippers, creating a truly impressive scene. But all of that was due to his cultivation talent. In fact, I carefully observed that Taoist friend's cultivation, and his cultivation technique was very ordinary. Of course, when I say ordinary, it's relative to you, senior. That Taoist friend's cultivation technique was at most a low-grade profound level technique. For a typical rogue cultivator, this technique would be considered excellent. But for the brother of someone as powerful as you, senior, it's simply impossible. Yi Hongling's words were very confident. This was why she thought Nian Chao had mistaken someone else. After all, a profound level technique is not bad. For most rogue cultivators and ordinary third-rate sects, it would be considered top tier, but it all depends on comparison. The senior before me, with so many treasures, even her robe was clearly valuable. Such a person would be cultivating techniques at least at the earth level, if not heaven level, for the brother of such a powerful senior. Especially with exceptional talent, it wouldn't make sense to not use his sister's superior techniques and instead cultivate a low-grade technique. That would be putting the cart before the horse. Who would believe that, if that were true? What kind of cruel sister would she have to be? So, at this moment, Yi Hongling was almost absolutely certain that the benefactor who saved her had no relation to the senior before her. However, as Yi Hongling thought this, Nian Chao remained silent for a long time. She couldn't help but be curious. Senior, why aren't you speaking? Senior, why aren't you speaking? Yi Hongling's question was like a sharp sword piercing through her heart. So precise, so ruthless. It was a lethal strike, at least. For Nian Chao, it was. Her composure was completely shattered, facing Yi Hongling's question. She could only stammer. But for a long time, Nian Chao had no idea how to respond. Even her image of a wise and powerful person was hard to maintain. Tears began to fall again. Not only because she didn't know how to explain, but also because she understood why Gushu's cultivation technique was so ordinary. 500 years ago, Qingshuan Holy Land was still called Qingshuan Sect. At that time, it was just an ordinary, third-rate sect. The highest level cultivation technique of the sect then was a profound level technique called Qingshuan Art. Back then, Gu Zhu relied on that profound level technique to cultivate himself into an invincible prodigy. After that, he confined himself in the Forbidden's area to participate in the fortune struggle. But after Gu Zhu entered the Forbidden's area, Qingshuan Sect suddenly began to receive endless fortune. The originally third-rate sect rose rapidly in just 500 years, entering the ranks of holy lands. Though it was just an ordinary holy land sect, without deep foundations or accumulation, thanks to the fortune's blessing, many things improved. Whether it was the magical treasures and weapons given to disciples, or the cultivation techniques provided for disciples' cultivation, among them, the cultivation technique received an exceptionally good fortune. They obtained a heaven-level technique. While not everyone could learn it, at least the personal disciples all switched to this technique. As for the profound level technique from 500 years ago, it became the basic technique for the lowest level inner disciples. 3 years ago, when Gu Zhu returned from the Forbidden's area, he was severely injured, suffering from Dao wounds. Even the sect master determined that in this life, he would never be able to cultivate again. Naturally, the sect's heaven-level technique was not given to Gu Zhu. Or rather, it wasn't about learning it. The entire sect didn't even want to let Gu Zhu take a look at it. The techniques provided for disciples' cultivation. Among them, the cultivation technique received an exceptionally good fortune. They obtained a heaven-level technique. While not everyone could learn it, at least the personal disciples all switched to this technique. As for the profound level technique from 500 years ago, it became the basic technique for the lowest level inner disciples. 3 years ago, When Guzu returned from the Forbidden area, he was severely injured, suffering from Dao wounds. Even the sect master determined that in this life, he would never be able to cultivate again. Naturally, the sect's heaven-level technique was not given to Guzu. Or rather, it wasn't about learning it. The entire sect didn't even want to let Guzu take a look at it, because everyone thought the same thing. Guzu was already a waste. What was there to see? What if Guzu spread this technique outside in the future? What then? Upon hearing this notion, Nian Chao initially thought that her master and junior sisters might be overreacting. But looking back, everyone in the sect, after seeing Guzu again, not only became emotionally distant, they also became wary, thinking more about it. For the past 3 years, no one truly treated Guzu as one of their own. Otherwise, why would the master assert that Guzu could never cultivate again? Yet Guzu managed to start cultivating again? Otherwise, why, after Guzu began cultivating again, could he only use the most basic profound level technique? This series of thoughts made Nian Chao silent in the face of Yi Hongling's questions. She couldn't explain it clearly, nor could she justify it. One couldn't possibly say that King Chuan Holy Land's way of treating its heroes was to constantly torment them after their return, treating them as outsiders. This is the truth. But it's a truth that can't be spoken of. At this moment, Nian Chao suddenly thought of something she had never considered before. She had always been trying to bring Guzu back to the sect, hoping that everything could be restored to how it was before, hoping that everything could return to the past. Was it really the right thing to do? Or rather, even if Guzu really returned with her, could things truly go back to how they were 500 years ago? As Nian Chao broke down in tears, unable to control herself. Meanwhile, in Yangshao City, at the small courtyard of Listening Rain residence, Guzu stopped cultivating and walked out of his room. A young maid dressed in a jade green dress, with a sweet appearance, immediately came up to him. Immortal, the meal is ready. Little he will serve you. But I can do it myself. Guzu thanked her, then took the bowl and chopsticks himself. He turned and asked, "Have you eaten?" The young maid quickly shook her head. Immortal, you haven't eaten yet. How could little he dare to eat first, before she could finish? Guzu shook his head. In the future, you don't have to wait for me. If you're hungry, you should eat first. Come, eat with me. As he spoke, he handed a bowl of rice to her. To Guzu, it was just a very ordinary gesture, but it left little he frozen in place. In disbelief, this immortal was inviting her to eat at the same table, and even served rice for her, a mere maid. Immortal! No! Absolutely not. Little he is a servant. It's not right for the immortal to serve her rice. Nor is she qualified to eat at the same table as the immortal. Little he was startled, quickly saying, but Guzu shook his head. I've told you before. I only asked you to help with laundry, cooking, and tidying up the courtyard. There's no master-servant relationship. You don't need to be so reserved. However, seeing how frightened she was, Guzu understood his persuasion was useless, so he didn't say anything more, and quietly started eating. After 2 days in the city, Guzu had finally settled down. Their small courtyard in Listening Rain residence was purchased for 800 spirit stones, at a low price from Wendao Pavilion. It was called a purchase, but it was actually a gift. In Yangshao City, where curfews are enforced, and every inch of land is precious, Buying a quiet and elegant small courtyard for 800 spirit stones was simply impossible. As for the maid named Little He, she was a mortal woman given by Wenbao Pavilion. Her biological father was once a rogue cultivator at the 8th level of refining, but after being killed by enemies, she became an orphan. She had to sell herself to Wenbao Pavilion as a servant. Guzu didn't refuse. After all, although he was a cultivator, he hadn't yet reached the golden core stage and didn't need to fast, being busy with cultivation every day. He needed someone to help with laundry and cooking. While they were eating, there was a sudden knock on the door outside, accompanied by an extremely arrogant shout. "Open up! Open the door! It's time to pay this month's tribute. Listen up, everyone. The southern market area is now under the control of the Green Fish Gang. Come out quickly. Or if you delay, any trouble that befalls your courtyard will not be our responsibility." These loud shouts immediately scared Little He, who was about to open the door, into freezing in place. Speaking of it, Yangshao City, known as the City of Rogue Cultivators, is considered a holy land for countless rogue cultivators. For most rogue cultivators, it seems that just coming to this place would allow them to live easily, live comfortably. But in reality, the old adage holds true. Even young heroes eventually grow old in the martial world. Even in ordinary sects, there are all sorts of hidden conflicts, let alone in Yangshao City, where many rogue cultivators gather. Indeed, Yangshao City doesn't have many sects, but it has many gangs. Many rogue cultivators who come to Yangshao City full of hope are first taught a lesson by these countless gangs upon arrival. An ideal place exists only in ideals. Just like now, even after buying a courtyard, they still face such troubles, never stepping out of the house, but still unable to avoid conflicts. Every year, numerous gangs are established, and numerous gangs are also destroyed. Ordinary rogue cultivators in Yangshao City can only survive in the gaps. Hey! I know there are people inside. I advise you to open the door quickly, or you'll be opposing the Green Fish Gang. Seeing that the door hadn't opened for a long time, the person outside became impatient and started banging again, as if he was about to break down the door. Little He turned pale with fear, looking to Guzu for help. But Guzu didn't even put down his ball, saying, "Don't be afraid." Little He swallowed hard, just about to say something, when she heard a loud voice outside. "What little fish dares to mess with our Senior Feng?" Senior Feng is a distinguished guest of our Guangshan gang. If you cause trouble again, you'll be crippled. However, the Green Fish Gang clearly didn't take the Guangshan gang seriously, immediately retorting. But as they cursed, it turned into screams. Then there was a cold snort. Taoist Feng is a guest of our Wenbao Pavilion. Idle people, do not provoke. Do not offend. Anyone who violates this will be considered an enemy of Wenbao Pavilion. This time, the noise outside quieted down. Little He, who had been nervously listening at the door, finally let out a long sigh of relief after hearing the crisis dissipate. She turned back to Guzu. Guzu had just finished eating, put down his bowl and chopsticks, and got up to leave. Little He quickly went up to clean, only to find that many of the dishes Guzu ate were only half eaten, with half left behind. It was obvious who it was left for. Little He suddenly looked up, watching Guzu's back, feeling a bit of gratitude, but thinking about the matter outside the door just now, her gratitude was replaced by shock. She came to serve as a maid for Guzu, sent by Wenbao Pavilion indeed. But from beginning to end, Wenbao Pavilion only told her to serve him well, never mentioning this immortal's identity. nor explaining any special requirements. This made little he think. She was just serving an ordinary guest of Wenbao Pavilion. Although this immortal was somewhat different, she didn't think much of it. But now it seemed this immortal's identity was probably more formidable than she imagined. At the very least, Wenbao Pavilion had sent someone specifically to protect him, to prevent disturbances from idle people. Definitely not something an ordinary person could qualify for. Little he's surprised, Gu Zhu didn't know, and even if he did, he wouldn't care. At this moment, he had already returned to his training room, activated the restriction, and prepared to cultivate again. However, before he could begin, a sharp pain from his soul suddenly struck, making Gu Zhu's face instantly pale. The Dao injury had relapsed. Fortunately, this was not the first time the Dao injury relapsed. Gu Zhu could only sit cross-legged and endure it. It wasn't until the sky had completely darkened that the relapse of the Dao injury finally ended. At this moment, Gu Zhu's entire body was drenched in sweat. His long white hair scattered around, looking somewhat disheveled. But Gu Zhu didn't care. Not even the slightest complaint. He just simply washed up, changed into clean clothes, and sat cross-legged again to start cultivating. The Dao injury needed to be resolved. The reason Gu Zhu came to Yangshao City was to find the opportunity to resolve the Dao injury. But before that opportunity appeared, what he needed to do was to continue improving himself. The night passed without a word. Early the next morning, Gu Zhu walked out of his room and encountered Su Rumei, who had come to visit. After arriving in Yangshao City for 2 days, Manager Su had been so busy her feet didn't touch the ground. Although she had arranged everything for Gu Zhu properly, she hadn't come to listening rain residence. This time, she finally took a break and came to visit Gu Zhu first thing. She didn't come empty-handed. On the contrary, Taoist Feng, I heard you've recently been asking the Crossing Sheng Gang to collect cultivation manuals. It so happens that Wenbao Pavilion has many such manuals, so I brought them all to give to you. Although their grades are not high, they might be useful to you. Taoist Feng. By the way, this listening rain residence, although elegant, hasn't been tended to for a long time, so I brought a few spiritual plants and some Taihu stones to place in the courtyard. Besides adding beauty, they can also help gather spiritual energy. Moreover, Taoist Feng, you've been focusing on cultivation, but the path of cultivation requires more than just perseverance and spirit stones. I brought some talismans that have the effect of gathering spiritual energy, and I'm giving them to you as well. Su Rumei truly is a skilled manager. From the first time Gu Zhu met her, this manager from Wenbao Pavilion, who never showed the airs of a golden core expert, always treated Gu Zhu with courtesy. The gifts she brought this time, though not extremely valuable, clearly showed her thoughtfulness. Cultivation manuals, garden decorations, and cultivation talismans. These items precisely catered to Gu Zhu's needs. Gu Zhu naturally thanked her repeatedly, and once again expressed that if Wenbao Pavilion ever needed help, they could always come to him. Haha! Speaking of needing help, there indeed is something. Oh, it's like this. Our Wenbao Pavilion has two formations that often have minor issues. Taoist Feng, you are skilled in formations, so if you have the time, we hope you can help us take a look. Human relations are an art. Simply giving gifts without expecting anything in return doesn't easily deepen the relationship between the parties. Sometimes, it might even bring some pressure and suspicion to the other party. appropriate mutual assistance, and cultivating a habit of mutual benefit is how relationships can last long. Surume understood this, and so did Guzu. The so-called formation problem was a minor issue, and he did not refuse. Since that's the case, why not go now? Now! Then I'll trouble Taoist Feng. Guzu and Surume walked out of the courtyard together and boarded Surume's carriage. Before getting on, Guzu noticed many divine senses sweeping towards him. However, as soon as these divine senses approached, Surume coldly snorted, blocking the surrounding people's prying. This was to tell the surrounding spies that Feng Bugui was a guest of Wenbao Pavilion and was valued by Surume. On the way to Wenbao Pavilion, Guzu picked up a spirit-gathering talisman Surume had given him and examined it carefully. Surume was curious. Taoist Feng, do you understand talismans? A little. Guzu replied. This response made Surume even more surprised. Good heavens! What kind of deity is this Feng Bugui? Able to enter the Tao, proficient in formation techniques, defeating enemies beyond his level with ease, even being acquainted with nascent soul experts, and now he even understands talismans.